Hello and welcome to Sound and Silence. What is Noise? By me, Blake Gardenier, aka Noiz Viol8ion. Now, today you are going to learn about sound. What is sound? What is noise? Why does sound sound like it sounds? And what is silence? Which is the opposite of sound. So first, I'd like to ask you a question, and this question's been asked many times before, but I want to know everyone's answer to it. So if you have one, leave a comment. So here's the question. If a tree falls and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? I'm going to tell you what I think, but first, I'm going to give a little intro about what we are talking about today. Today, we are talking about humans, and since, I mean, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for, I wouldn't be teaching anybody if nobody heard me. So, how you are interpreting the sound as being the observer. So, we'll start with that and we'll move on to silence and briefly talk about silence because I'm sure everybody already knows what silence is. And then lastly, we'll talk about sounds, the properties of waves that create the sound, and the shape of the wave, the frequency. We'll go into the harmonic series and touch on that a little bit. And then human perception. So where we started, if a tree falls and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? And the answer is you don't know if it does or not because you're not there to hear it. So I like to relate this to a laptop playing music. So if you're in your room and you're listening to music on your laptop and you step out of your room and you can't hear the music anymore. So is your laptop still playing music? Because you heard it playing and then you walked out. So is it still playing? And the answer is you don't know. It's the same answer as this question here. The answer is you don't know because there's an unlimited number of possibilities to why your laptop could not be playing music. Maybe the battery died. Maybe your hard drive crashed. Or maybe the motherboard failed. Or maybe it fell off the bed and your laptop just broke completely. There's an unlimited number of possibilities. So if a tree falls and no one is there to hear the sound, hear it, does it make a sound? And the answer is if there's no one there to hear it, if there's no actual proof, then you're just making an assumption. And you know what they say about assumptions? Assumptions make an ass out of me and you. And so, with that, we'll talk about the observer. So, in this case, you heard the sound, and you know the sound was real because of the human element. The human element. So if we have a tuning fork here producing a sound, this is a source, and you slap this tuning fork against the table or a wall, and these tongs will vibrate violently back and forth, compressing and expanding the air, compressing, expanding, compressing, expanding, compressing, expanding, compressing, expanding, back and forth, causing these waves in the air. And these waves travel through the air until it hits these sensors in your ear and your eardrum. Now, I'm not a professional on the human biology, but it'll hit these sensors, and these sensors will create signals that will send up to the brain. So it's like digital signals going to your brain, and based on the properties of the sound is how you will react. So a good example of this is my aunt. For some reason, she hates the sound of ice clanking in a glass. And so if you do that around her, she freaks out. And I got another friend who, if you rub styrofoam or two balloons together, it makes that high pitched squeaking noise, and he just can't stand it. And so as we go through life, we develop these tastes and preferences for sounds we dislike and sounds we like. For example, when I was a kid, the ice cream truck would drive by and I'd hear that little melody and then I'd go running towards it. And if you hear a bear roar, then you'll obviously run away from it. And so it's really the characters of the sound. The sounds are just waves entering in your ear, but it's how you interpret that sound and what it means to you. And tastes and preferences, this also relates to music genres. Uh, Most people or everyone is completely unique fingerprint, so everyone has their own tastes and preferences. And if you get into these about what makes you, if you really self-aware on your tastes and preferences, then that will make a huge difference in your production if you want to be a music producer, because you are unique and everything that inspires you will be unique to you. So the next one is emotions, and it's your emotional state is also a big effect on how you will interpret these signals entering in your brain. So if you're happy, then more than likely you're going to be in a good mood and hearing good sounds. And if you're depressed or angry, then if you hear anything, that will set you off and you'll be mad. Whereas if you're happy, you'd probably just blow it off. And so it's an actual filter that you put on the signal and interpret it differently. And this is why people will take drugs, smoke pot, do marijuana, take Molly, because it will change their chemicals and their physical state, and they'll actually be hearing music differently and have a whole new experience than if you are sober or mad or angry. And so these two bullets are unique to everybody. Um, it's a lot of self-awareness, which I highly recommend. Just write down stuff you like and the opposite. But this next one is universal. So this is the same for everybody, every human. Our hearing range is from 20 to 20,000 hertz. That is the little part of the audio spectrum, wave spectrum, that we care about in music because that's all we can hear. So you have up here, you have microwaves and gamma rays and different types of waves in the megas and gigahertz. But since humans can only hear from 20 to 20,000 hertz, then that's really all we care about. The next thing is the Fletcher Munson equal loudness contour, and that's this chart down here. And this is because humans hear different frequencies at different volumes. So lower frequencies are harder for the human to hear, and so we really have to turn those up. And these middle frequencies, because that is the human voice, the ear is very finely tuned to pick up these frequencies. So for example, if you're at 100 hertz, then it has to be at least around 38 dBs. Whereas if you're at 1,000 hertz, you probably just above zero any sound and you can hear it. And another thing that is a big shifter in our hearing and causes big reactions to the human is contrast. So contrast would be if you're playing a really loud noise and you want a giant contrast to really have big impact, then if you're already loud, you can't go louder. You have to go soft. You got to play a really quiet noise, and that will have the biggest impact. Or even another thing is if you have that loud noise and you go completely silent. If you have a noise playing and then you go silent. And it's always good to be thinking about what's the opposite. What is the exact opposite thing that I could do? And you will have giant contrast. Um, a little bit, we've already touched on that. Dynamics would be uh, volume. So if it has a very small volume and it scales up to a large volume, as opposed to just being one constant level. So you have that dynamic range. Um, Another thing that the human experience likes is to know the space it's in. What kind of room, what kind of environment are you sitting in? Where is the setting? Are you in a cave? Are you in your room? Are you at a club? Are you in a field? All of these different spaces have, it's mainly reverb. If you apply different reverbs, you can actually change the environment that you're listening in. And so that is a great concept to be aware of, is about where are you putting your listener? What is the environment? And as you're in that space, how you kind of make it a 360-degree space, there is panning, which imagine a ambulance. You're standing on the side of the road and there's an ambulance coming up on your left and you start to hear the sirens and they're getting louder and louder and louder and louder and it finally crosses you and then it gets quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter. And that's panning. You can move something all the way from the left to the right, like something's being, like a car is driving in front of you. And and so we have that whole space pannings, and the next is volume. Uh, we measure volume in decibels, and decibels is the unit of sound measurement for audio. Uh, just to be aware of, decibels is not like degrees in temperature, so it's not an exact uh, unit of measurement like degrees, temperature, like inches, feet. It is more of a comparison and a ratio between the threshold of human hearing and the other measured sound. What's the decibel difference, the sound pressure level difference? Um, Here's a couple examples of decibel levels and the noise source. So 55 is probably what it's at right now, you listening to me out of your computer speakers or having a conversation. If you got an electric drill, you're around 94 decibels. Uh, Up here at a sports event, around 115 decibels, and 120 up here is a little less than a jet takeoff at 130 decibels. And when you're up here, just a warning, hearing is very sensitive, and if you damage your hearing at all, it doesn't come back. So you really want to take care of your ears and wear protection if you're going to be in these spaces for too long. And if you're a producer and you mix, these are a couple values to keep in mind. If you want to make a track louder, a little bit louder, or a little bit softer, it usually requires at least a 3 dB for a perceivable change. And the other one is a 10 dB change is perceived as twice as loud or half as loud as the as you have it now. And so if you want to, this also relates to distance. If you want to move something twice as far in front of you, then it would be a 10 dB drop. And if you want to move it twice as close to you, then it would be a 10 dB gain. And so those are good little tidbits there. So what is silence? That was silence. Silence is the absence of sound or noise. And so if there's no noise present, then all that's left is the silence. And I think of it as the starting point because I think it's silent and then it gets loud. Some people might have thought, you know, it was loud and then it got silent, but I think silence really is a starting point and a reset button because you can have all this commotion and then it it ends. So the noise ends and it's like a reset button because you can start with anything else that you want. You don't have to keep going with what you're doing. As long as you have that little bit of silence, it breaks up what you're doing and it's effective. So not it's a, it's an underutilized tool because the contrast from silence to noise is huge. Um, so if you can use silence effectively, then that will improve your mixes very much. And I just said this can make people uncomfortable because some people just get uncomfortable in silences, so they always have to have noises around. And it just shows that silence is a big impact on anything that you're doing and is a tool that should be in your belt. And coming back around to if a tree falls and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? And the answer is you don't know. It could have been silent. It could be a silent fall, but don't make any assumptions. So what is sound? the definition of sound, which I thought was cool, I Googled it, and this is what came out. It said vibrations that travel through the air or another medium and can be heard when they reach a person's or animal's ear. And that last part is kind of what drills it home is it's only sound unless it's heard by a person or an animal, as someone's there to perceive it, or else it doesn't exist if no one's if it doesn't have attention or if you're not perceiving it. Um, so sound is made up of waves. Uh, there's a lot that can be described in waves. Waves are all around us. It's a universal law of waves, and so we'll touch on that and the parts of the waves, uh, the frequency, what that does to a sound, the shape of a sound, and the different types of waves and what they sound like. And we kind of already went over all that. Human perception, unique, everyone has their own unique tastes, similarities, the hearing range, and emotions. Sound and waves. So, like I was saying, the universal law is this here is your standard sine wave. This is the simplest waveform that exists. It has the wavelength, how long it is, has an amplitude, how tall, and the crest is the peak, and it comes down to the trough, which is the lower valley, and then back up and repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats. And so universal law, this is like during our day, we're awake, we're awake, we're awake, we go to sleep, we go to sleep, and we come back, and tomorrow we're awake, we're awake, we're awake, and we go to sleep. And this cycle repeats for the rest of your life. And so cell phone, say this is our cell phone battery, and we're at 50% right here. And so we charge it, it gets up to 100%, and you use it all day, and it drops back down to 0. And then you charge it, and it goes all the way up to 100%, and it goes all the way down to 0. And this will repeat infinitely. Um, Water in waves, when you throw a giant rock into the water, then it compresses that water where the rock came in, and you have these ripples. If you've seen a pebble thrown into the water, it has the circle where the rock fell in, and then just ripples after it until it slowly dies down. The phase of the wave is measured in 0 to 360 degrees. So this is our 0, and we go up. This would be 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270, 360, or 0 again. And that will repeat. And how fast it repeats is the frequency. In music, we measure it in hertz, which is cycles per second, and that's how many cycles 0 to 360 happens in 1 second. So period is time for one cycle, and so hertz, you would divide the cycles by the number of seconds, the number of cycles by the number of seconds. And that would give you your time. In our asleep, awake, your time would be 24 hours. The wavelength, 100 hertz, just a representation, is 11.3 feet long. So these low bass frequencies are very, very long, and they're they're not as mobile as the higher frequencies, which move around a lot faster. So these are a lot slower, and you can feel them. As you go up, as the frequencies get higher, and as you can see, the waves get shorter until they're really, really, really tiny. So it's like you're a giant and you have these waves, tiny waves hitting you, so you don't feel them as much as these huge waves that are pulsating and making your body move. And so the amplitude is related to volume. So however high the amplitude is, the louder the sound will be. And this is a picture of a string. Imagine a guitar string. You strike it and it makes these waves. And that is the sound that you're hearing. As we move on to the audio spectrum, uh, like I said, we're only focusing on the 20 to 20 kilohertz range because that is the only range that the human can hear. And so as we subdivide that range farther for music purposes, we have our sub-bass range right here. Here's a photo too of the frequency range and just kind of where some instruments fall into it if you do electronic music. We have the bass from 80 to 300 hertz. So it's kind of where our kicks are too. The mid range is 300 to 4 kilohertz. So that's all this 300 to 4. That's our warmth, our knock, our definition and bite. And the high range is from 4K to 20 kilohertz. And that's our clarity, our air, our sparkle. It's that fizziness, makes you feel real good. Notes. And if we subdivide even these even farther, then we notice that these are all frequencies here, and we label these frequencies with notes. So if you're in music, then every note, imagine these are keys on the keyboard, every note has its own specific frequency. And this is how everyone is on the same page, how if you write down a song that it's played the same everywhere because everyone follows these specific frequencies and follows the labeling that goes with that frequency. That's called a note. And as you go up, the pitch goes up. So the pitch is the frequency. You can have a low pitch, which is your basses down here, or a high pitch up here. And as we play these frequencies, if we have a pure sine wave playing 32.7, that would be our fundamental frequency. And so as we play the fundamental, then it has these overtones and harmonics and subharmonics that are within this frequency, and it fills up the audio spectrum, as we'll see, because the definition of harmonics is sequence of sounds, pure tones, represented by sinusoidal waves, in which the frequency of each sound is an integer multiple of the fundamental, the lowest frequency. And so if this is our fundamental right here, then these are all the harmonics. And if you want to go more into that, there's some lectures by Leonard Bernstein, and he goes deep into harmonics, and I would recommend watching that. But just imagine you have this tone, and then these tones are hidden inside that one, and it adds more and more richness and fills up the spectrum more, but they're all just hidden in this overtone. And so if we have our fundamental at 32.7 and we cut this string in half, then it would vibrate twice as fast as this string. And so it is a naturally sounding great note, which is exactly 1 octave higher than our fundamental. And if we go to our third, which is 3 times, it is a G2. A fourth, we're up here. The fifth harmonic is E3, 168.4 hertz. And we go to number 6, 196 hertz. And when we get to 7, 7's actual frequency is 228.9 hertz, which falls in between this A and this A sharp. So a lot of people like to bump it to this A sharp, but it's really in between these two. And this will keep going infinitely, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and these notes all sound great together. So as we're talking about waves, there is multiple types of waves. So far, we've mainly been looking at the sine wave, which is simple. It's pure. It's only the fundamental frequency. So the harmonics, there's none of those upper harmonics. It's just the fundamental frequency. Um, it's used for subbasses and whistling timbres. And I'll play an example of a sine wave right here. Do 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 do. Do 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 dun 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 dun. Here is a demonstration of a pure sine wave, and this is only the fundamental, so it's a pure basic sine wave. If you want to take a look here, let me pull this over. I'm running Ableton, and so I have an oscillator playing a pure sine wave, and this is the audio spectrum, and so it's just that one frequency, 264. If you go octave lower to 132 hertz, exactly 1/2, and if we go an octave lower, 1/2 of that, and that's a sub wave. So if you're not on headphones or you don't have a sub, you probably can't hear that. And so that is what a sine wave sounds like. The square wave is two states, high and low. It doesn't have these variable points in between. It's always high, the highest amplitude it is, and then the lowest. And it oscillates back and forth, high and low, high and low. This type of wave is used for mellow or hollow sounds, wind instruments, can add width to strings and pads, and can be beefed up pretty good for bass sounds. So let me pull my Ableton back over here and show y'all what a square wave sounds like. So this is just selecting the waveform. So this is a square wave with two upper harmonics. So that's a sub wave right there. If we want to look at it, see you have the sub, and then you have the two upper harmonics. So the third and the fifth harmonic in this case. And if we want to add harmonics, we can keep going up. This one has 8 harmonics. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you notice how the sound's richer. It's filling up more of the audio spectrum until we go all the way here. And we go up an octave. another, another, another. That is a square wave. Next is a triangle. The triangle is a lot like a sine wave uh, and sawtooth, but it's not as harmonically rich as a sawtooth because it only has the odd harmonics, while a sawtooth has even and odd harmonics. Triangle waves are mixed with other waves to provide sparkle or bright effect, and it is also glittery. So I'll demonstrate a triangle wave. Um, that's a high frequency, but that's a triangle wave. And you notice compared to a sine, it's a little more rich. So if we drop down a couple octaves, we can see all these extra odd harmonics as opposed to the sine wave, which just has the fundamental. There's a triangle bass wave. And finally, a sawtooth wave. This one is very harmonically rich because it has even and odd harmonics. It's a bright, brassy sound. It can get gritty. A lot of people use it for leads because it's so harmonically rich. It fills up the frequency spectrum very well and has a powerful impact. So I'll show you a sawtooth here. We'll start out with just 3 harmonics. That's the bass wave. And if we add up 8 harmonics, 64 harmonics, you can tell it's already getting very full. And all harmonics filled up. So notice the whole spectrum's full. That is a sawtooth wave. And those are how the different types of waves sound, and we can also shape these waves to get different effects. So however the amplitude is shaped is the envelope. It has an attack. So how long does it take to get from silence all the way up to its maximum amplitude, and from silence to full volume. And so when it hits that full volume, it will decay down to the sustain, or if the sustain's all the way up, then there is no decay. It will go peak, sustain, or if the sustain's all the way down, then it will go from peak and decay all the way down. But in this example here, we have a middle sustain, so it hits the peak, it revs up from silence, hits its peak, and then it holds the sustain. So imagine you're playing a piano and you press the key and it goes up, and then however long you hold it, this sustain holds it until you release the key. And after you release the key, the volume, however long the volume takes to go all the way down to silence, is the release. And I'll play a couple examples here. Um, so in this case, this is similar to a piano or a pluck or a kick. So it has the maximum amplitude, so the sound comes in hot and just dies down. So you hear the strong initial, the initial cut, and then it goes all the way down. But if I hold the key, then you have the strong initial, and then it decays a lot slower than if I just tap it. And so another example would be strings. Strings have much more of a longer attack like this, and so it takes a while for them to come up to their full amplitude. And then after they're there, they can hold this sustain a lot longer. So until I release the button, this note's gonna continue to sustain. And once I release it, that time it takes for that sound to go from the sustain to the release is the release time. And so that's a short kind of demonstration and overview of sounds and how sounds get their color, get their tone, get their texture, and get their shape, and really how humans perceive each sound. So I hope to do more of these tutorials like this. These are a couple resources that I used um, for pictures and a couple informations, but two other resources that I didn't include here. One would be the Dance Music Manual by Rick Snowman, and if you're trying to be a producer for electronic music or anything really, it's a great resource to use. It's if you know that, then you know probably 90% of what you need to know, and the rest is just how hard you work and how much you practice at your skill. And the next resource would be Mike Monday. He's been a big influence in how I think about music and different techniques to use to improve your skill. And it's a different process than a lot of people take, so I'd highly recommend him. So go check him out. Thank y'all for being with me. Thanks for sticking it through. I'm doing more of these. Like and subscribe. Peace out. I love you.